With the NBA season underway, it is time for me to start making my NBA playoff predictions. Earlier this week, I released my Western Conference playoff predictions, so if you haven't seen that yet, definitely go check it out. I will leave a link in the description, but without further ado, let's get right into my Eastern Conference playoff predictions. Before I get into my 1 seed, I want to say a little something about my Western Conference playoff predictions. In that video, I said that the Warriors would make the playoffs. I said that they were just going through chemistry issues and that they would pick it up and be good enough to make it to a lower seed in the playoffs. Now, obviously, since I released my video before some events transpired, like them losing to the Suns by 20, and then Steph Curry breaking his hand, and he will be out for a couple months, I now no longer believe that the Warriors are even close to a playoff team. So, if you do check that video out or you've already watched it, just know that I made it before Steph Curry got hurt and they lost to the Suns by 20. Anyways, getting into my first team, the first seed that I have in the Eastern Conference, I have the 76ers. So far this season, even though we have a small sample size, the Sixers have looked absolutely amazing. Haven't lost a game yet, have beat some pretty good teams. They haven't played the toughest teams yet, but they have beat some pretty good teams, and they have a better record than anybody else in the Eastern Conference. Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and they added Al Horford this offseason. I think that this team is very scary, and I think that they could make a very deep playoff run, if not make it to the finals. They now have that playoff experience under their belts, whereas last year they were a younger team, and they lost to the Raptors, in my opinion, because I think the Raptors just had more playoff experience. They were able to get it done in the end. I think that will not happen this year. They will not lose in the playoffs because of youth, and so far this season, I think that they have proved that they are a legit powerhouse in the Eastern Conference. At the second seed, I have the Milwaukee Bucks, and even though they have not looked great this season, Giannis hasn't looked amazing. He did look amazing in the first game. He did have a 30-point triple-double, but in the past couple games, he hasn't looked as good. However, it is only the first 4 games of the season. His role players haven't looked that good either. And like I said, they haven't looked that good, but yet they have still won 2 games. They are still 2-2, and they are still, as of right now, even though it's only 4 games, they are still a playoff team. But I think that the issues that they have right now will not be an issue down the line. Giannis is only going to get better. He has only been improving, working on his game this whole off season. And I think that as the role players kind of pick it up, the Bucks will end up having a very good record, especially in a weaker Eastern Conference at the end of the season. I see no doubt in my mind that the Bucks will get a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, just because, to be frank, just how weak it is. Even though they have struggled in the beginning, I don't see them being worse than teams like the Bulls, like the Knicks, like who else is bad in the Eastern Conference? The Nets. Even though I don't think that the Nets are terrible, they definitely haven't played that well so far. The Celtics aren't the same team that they were. The Pistons haven't looked great. The Pacers haven't looked great. Just all the other teams that we might have expected to be good teams in the Eastern Conference this season just haven't looked that great. So I think for that reason, the Bucks will be fine and they will be the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. At the 3 seed, I have the Toronto Raptors, my favorite team, and even though they lost Kawhi Leonard, like I said when I was talking about the Bucks, this is just a very weak Eastern Conference, and even though they lost Kawhi, the Raptors are definitely not bad. Pascal Siakam has been absolutely showing out in these first few games this season. I think that he will prove himself as a legit first option in the NBA this season. The Raptors gave him a max contract, which I think he definitely deserved. So far, he's averaging like 30 points per game, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, and like a block and a half, 2 blocks, something like that. Something ridiculous, some great stat line, and even though it is only the first 4 games of the season, I think that just goes to show what Pascal Siakam can do when he is the first option. Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet, the two other main scoring options on the team, have also looked very good so far this season. I think that the Raptors' success is going to depend on their role players, their bench. Last year, I was not that impressed with Marc Gasol, mostly in the playoffs. He just didn't look like the same Marc Gasol that was on the Grizzlies, which makes sense because he is getting older and he is slowing down. So I didn't expect him to be some player, but like some great player. But I think that if the Raptors want to have success in the playoffs, he definitely needs to step up. Serge Ibaka, another guy who is getting older out of his prime, also needs to step up. I think he's coming off the bench right now, but he needs to bring that energy off of the bench. OG Anunoby, coming off of an injury that he didn't play in the playoffs because of last season. I think he needs to do big things this season. Norman Powell, another guy who I think needs to do big things. Just a lot of bench players that I think need to step up. Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, they are all doing their job. I think that the main thing with the Raptors is going to be their role players this season. At the 4th seed, I have the Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat are a team who, without Jimmy Butler for their first couple of games, has looked very good. Obviously, the main name that comes to mind is Kendrick Nunn, an undrafted rookie who in these first 5 games for the Miami Heat has averaged over 20 points per game. In the first 5 games, he had over 100 points. He's the only rookie to do that since Kevin Durant, and Kevin Durant had an absolutely ridiculous rookie year. And the fact that he is doing this as an undrafted rookie makes it even more ridiculous. He earned a spot in the starting lineup after not being drafted. Absolutely crazy. Obviously, another player that comes to mind is Tyler Hero, who I think a lot of people thought would be putting up the numbers that Kendrick Nunn is putting up, but he isn't doing too shabby either. He's averaging around 15 points per game so far, which is a solid contribution for a starting shooting guard in the NBA. If these young players, if these rookies can keep it up for the Miami Heat, and now that Jimmy Butler is back, I see no problem with them getting a top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, especially with the other role players that they have. Bam Adebayo, Derrick Jones Jr., these other guys. If Dion Waiters can, get himself right, can accept the fact that he is coming off the bench, I think that he could be a very great player off the bench if the Heat decide to kind of put him as that 6th man. But like I said, Heat, top 5 seed, number 4 in the Eastern Conference. At the 5th seed, I have the Boston Celtics. And obviously, this offseason was a tough one for the Celtics, losing Kyrie Irving and Al Horford, 2 of their star players. But not all was lost because they did add Kemba Walker, who has been an elite point guard, a top 10 point guard in the league for almost his whole career, besides probably the first few seasons. Dude has been legit. The only problem is he's been on the Hornets, so he hasn't really ever been to the playoffs, or he's never really had a legit shot at the playoffs. But now that he's on the Celtics, that will change for Kemba Walker, and even though he hasn't looked amazing in these first couple games, obviously he's on a brand new team, and point guards on a brand new team, I think it's especially hard for them to adjust because they are learning a new offense, a new system, and they are the ones running that system. The same thing I think happened to Mike Conley for the Utah Jazz. He started off his first few games absolutely terrible. Then this past game, he had like 30 points, 5 assists. He was player of the game. And I think that as time goes on, Kemba Walker will kind of move into the role of a star point guard for the Celtics. But even though Kemba Walker hasn't been at his best so far, that has not hurt the Celtics too bad. They aren't undefeated, but they definitely aren't looking terrible. Gordon Hayward, after suffering a gruesome ankle injury a few years ago, absolutely terrible injury, has looked very good so far, possibly all-star caliber. Obviously, we're only 5 games into the season, but he has looked great so far. Jaylen Brown hasn't looked bad either. Jason Tatum hasn't looked bad, and I think that as these players learn to play together better, they will only look better. I think that their role players have also looked pretty decent. I think that in a weak Eastern Conference, like I've repeated multiple times through this video, it shouldn't be a problem for the Celtics making the playoffs. At the 6th seed, I have the Detroit Pistons, and the Detroit Pistons are a team who for the past probably 4 years have been kind of stuck. They've been a playoff team, but they haven't been real legit contender for the finals, or even for the Eastern Conference Finals for that matter. After adding Blake Griffin, they maybe thought they had a better chance at that, but it just hasn't really come together in the way that I think they thought it would. Reggie Jackson, their point guard, hasn't really been a star point guard that I think that they need him to be if they want to be Eastern Conference title contenders. Andre Drummond, while he's been great, he hasn't really improved a ton. He was great a couple years ago. He kind of emerged as a great center, and he's been the same, which isn't bad for the past couple years, but he hasn't improved as much. Blake Griffin last year improved as a player, but I think that the main thing with the Pistons is going to be just playing together and finding out how they complement each other. Luke Kennard, their young shooting guard that they drafted a couple summers ago. I'm not sure if he's in his second year or third year, but he has looked good so far. I think that if he can have a bigger role on the team, they will be looking better. Derrick Rose has looked pretty good for them so far as well. I think that if they can have their role players kind of step up and their star players can start to play together better, I think that the Pistons will be a very good team. They could possibly be higher than the 6th seed, but from what I've seen so far, I can't really put them higher than that. So at the 6th seed, I have the Detroit Pistons. At the 7th seed, I have the Brooklyn Nets. And even though their record doesn't reflect it so far, I don't think that they have looked that bad. Obviously, Kyrie Irving has been absolutely insane in the first week of the NBA season. Obviously, it hasn't translated to wins because their record as of right now stands at 1-3. But if Karis LeVert can emerge as a second star, if DeAndre Jordan can kind of be that guy when he is there, if he can be that guy that he was for the Clippers, if there are other players like Taurean Prince, like Spencer Dinwiddie, if those guys can step up and play how they were playing last season, not Taurean Prince, but mainly Spencer Dinwiddie for playing last season. He was very good last season. He put himself in the conversation for most improved player. If he can be that guy, if Taurean Prince can step up, if DeAndre Jordan can play as good as he was for the Clippers, and if Karis LeVert can be a legit second scoring option, I think that the Nets could be a very unstoppable team this season, even without KD. Now, obviously, this is a lot to ask, and it probably won't all happen, but I think that so far, every game the Nets have lost has been a close one. Obviously, on opening night, when Kyrie Irving dropped 50 points, he was one shot away from winning that game, and I think that as time goes on, their wins will stack up and they'll start winning these closer games. A thing that will be common in the NBA for these first few months is going to be chemistry issues. So many changes this offseason, especially with star players. So I don't have too much worry about how the Nets will do, about what their record is right now, and I think that they will be a playoff team in this year's playoffs. At the 8th and final seed in the Eastern Conference, I have the Indianapolis Pacers. And similar to the Nets, their record definitely indicates that they are a bad team so far, only winning one game, but there are a lot of bright spots to look at. For the Pacers, Malcolm Brogdon has been absolutely ridiculous. He has had a double-double, 20 points, over 10 assists in every single game. One of the most underrated offseason pickups, in my opinion. Malcolm Brogdon was doing great for the Bucks, and even though he didn't put up the numbers, I think that was solely to Giannis getting most of the touches, Eric Bledsoe coming to the team, Chris Middleton being the second scoring option. I think that now that Malcolm Brogdon is the main scoring option for the Pacers, he has proved what type of a player he is. Miles Turner hasn't played as good as he could, I think. So I think that that's the reason for some of these early losses, some of these early troubles. Domantas Sabonis hasn't played terrible, but he also hasn't played great. He hasn't lived up to his full potential, I think. So if their two young big men can, kind of play what I think that they are capable of playing, if Malcolm Brogdon can keep it up, I think that they will start winning games. And I think that once Victor Oladipo gets back, we all saw what he did before he got hurt. Dude was putting himself in the MVP conversation before he tore his ACL. I think once he gets back, this Pacers team could be very scary. And even though I have them at the 8th seed, I think that they could possibly get to the second round of the playoffs if they do end up getting a higher seed than the 8th seed. But like I said, their record right now does not indicate where they will be at the end of the season. So at the final 8th seed, I have the Indianapolis Pacers. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Also, remember to check out my Western Conference playoff predictions. A link will be in the description for that video. Thanks a ton. I'll see you in the next one.